So, changing the tabletop RPG system you're playing can be a bit difficult sometimes and confusing, especially when it comes to the combat situation of the new system. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Hi guys. So, my players at Spanish House, where I go every Monday and every other Friday to play tabletop RPG games, just had their first taste of combat in this system. And since all my players have never played Savage World before, and last time we did at the stream that somehow been taken down, they avoided combat. The both combat situations that were presented to them. But then as always, there are, when a situation comes up, like I do tend to having a small chance that you can escape or not have to battle at all. And I do try to limit that part mostly, but if it's not like the big combat, I can let it slide. But fortunately, not unfortunately, luckily my players at the time were the ever first session with Savage World, they actually was clever enough to use what they had to avoid combat with a slight outnumbering marsh trolls. There were three enough of us had to face about 5-6 marsh trolls to save a young woman that has been kidnapped to forcibly marry the king of the marsh trolls to serve an entity I random gave a name to. I have completely forgot. So when it was like, I felt like they needed to have a taste of how combat is in Savage Worlds, because it's very different from D&D combat. And so they got a chance of doing that this Monday, and they had fun, but it was a bit weird. It was confusing, a lot of questions, which is obviously valid. And I would feel like talking about how combat system works in Savage Worlds, since I think most of the people that are watching my stuff is more used to D&D and not Savage Worlds. And if you do play a lot of Savage Worlds, you know if I'm gonna talk over my ear, but this is more like how I have interpreted the game, and I played it since 2020 or 2021. And for start off, in combat, we don't roll for initiative in Savage Worlds. We use playing cards. And in every round you pull a card and the highest one goes. And if you have the same number or the same closed card, then it is the spade, heart, diamond, then clubs. In that order of turns. But we also have the jokers in the deck. Because if you pull a joker in the round, you decide where you want to start in this round's combat. So if you have done a couple of turns where you maybe pull poorly the lowest card all time, or pretty good, but as a group of players, you have an option. Technically, before things, you can talk about each other, like come up with ideas. So before the new round starts, if you have a plan in motion, but unfortunately, most of the players that are supposed to go before you draws a low card, like a 3 or a 4, and you pull a joker, you can now decide to go straight after that person that needs to start the combo you were trying to do. Also, as a beneficial, if you draw a joker, it is that all the players get something called a Benny. Now bennies are a thing in Savage World where you can use to spend to re-roll a dice roll. But in combat, it has another effect. You can spend a benny to soak up wounds. And that's another part of that's different from D&D and Pathfinder is that in Savage World you don't have HP, you don't have hit points, you have wounds. And each player and any wild cards, which players also consider as being wild cards, can take 3 wounds before they go down. Which means they're incapacitated, so they still draw cards, but they can't do anything. And then you roll injury table for that and stuff like that. So you can die if you don't get healed or stuff like that, or someone can use either with magic or you use a healing roll to stop the bleeding to come out. You just make sure that you can get to a real doctor or medical medic. So if you pull a Joker, you decide where in the round you want to start, and all the players gets a benny. Now, as a GM, if you, the GM, pull a Joker, that means, again, you get to decide where you want your villains to start. And I do like to, like, if I feel like the battle's going a bit too of the GM's way, I might let the players have a shot of certain things around. If it's been, I feel like it's even going, or the players walloping my monsters, I might decide to like having the monster that I pull, that pull the card, go first to try to change up the rhythm or make it more difficult for the players. Now, the wild cards of the GM's monsters, they get their own card, and mostly if you have a bunch of mooks, you give them one card and it goes from there. Or you can have a card for each combatant if you want to, but it's gonna be slightly annoying. This was like, I think that's the same in D&D. Like, if you have a bunch of mooks and stuff like that, you put them in the same initiative order. You don't roll the initiative die for every single goblin, wolf, whatever has in front of the hero party. And then we now come to combat, which is here, like, you roll your skill to what you want to do. If you want to fight, you roll a fighting die. You want to try to grapple, you do an athletics check. You want to shoot something, you shoot a shooting bow. If you have magic, then you have actually 3 options to how you want to cast your magic. You have spell casting if you're using magic. If you have an arcane background that's been labeled as miracles, you use an arcane skill called Fate. And if you have specialists, stuff like that, or gifted is the arcane skill called, then you have focus as your spell casting die. So with magic you have 3 different skills you can choose when to have to focus on, depending on how you want to utilize your magic. And a part of this right now is where I think is the biggest difference between D&D and Savage Worlds. Because in D&D, your AC is for everything you can do against the villain, or the villain can do against you. So if you don't hit the armor class, you don't hit, no matter what you do. But in Savage World, it's a bit more have realistic logic behind their fighting, in a sense like you have a parry, which technically is your AC in Savage Worlds, but it's only for melee attacks. So if you punch people, you use a sword, dagger, hammer, axe, that is all against the parry, which now your fighting die needs to beat. But if you're using a bow, a gun, or you're slinging spells at a person, you don't focus on the parry at all. What in Savage World, the only thing you have as a limit is the environment, your range, coverage, and well, if it's a hefty wind, you might still have some minuses. So, and that is in the sense of Savage World in concept, I think is the more logical, because you can't really parry a bullet or an arrow or a magical flame thrown at you. You don't really parry that. So instead we have a starting roll you need to beat, which is 4. Which is Savage World is basically any skill check before combat or outside combat. If you hit a 4 on your die, you have succeeded. Like, it's mostly like if you want information, you roll a 4, you get the minimum information that you need to go ahead. If you roll more above 4, you get more. You get more information. As always, the better you roll, the better information you get. But the minimum requirement to get the answers to your questions to continue your quest or where in the story you are means yes, you get that. You get something when you hit a 4. 3 and below, you don't get anything. We are more focused on combat right now. Now, the minuses with combat in range, you can have like coverage, you can have a shield, you can have a being very windy outside, but also like that is mostly, that gives you a mental or practical way of blocking. Then but if you don't have anything that, you need to stay a bit longer away from your enemies, which is not the best thing if you're a melee guy, but that's the one way you know them try to hit you will not get harder. Because with short range and nothing else can cover it, you just need to hit a 4, then you hit your target. Not necessarily means you damage them, but you hit your target at least. Because then you have something called toughness in Savage World, which is technically your vigor half, the vigor style half and +2, then any armor you have put on. So that is a way, okay, if you can hit enough with your damage die, you hit me, but you didn't damage me. In the Savage World, you damage somebody if you hit 4 or above their current toughness with armor, unless you have weapons that has armor piercing. If you have armor piercing, you ignore a certain amount of the armor. So for instance, if you have like a leather vest that has a +2 armor and the arrow he's shooting has an AP of 1, then you ignore 1 point of armor, which means easier to hurt your opponent. But then when you then go into mid-range and long range of your weapons, that's when you're gonna get some minuses. Start with a -2, then a -4. Now you can combat a ranged weapon as a melee guy as well, without having to stay out of range or have to look for cover. And that's when you hit the ranked season. That's when you can have an edge that calls dodge. Then we start with a -2 to get hit by a ranged attack targeting you. Then you get, at veteran, you get the improved version of that, which is a -4. So that is one way if you don't have coverage and stuff like that. Or your GM forgets to act like a villain or a smart guy should do in a sticky situation when he sees that his foes has bows and guns. Where can I cover to protect myself from the bullet fire or arrow flying to my head? And yes, I have mostly forgot that from time to time, most of the time actually. And speaking of forgetting, I went a bit easy because I wanted them to like fill the system, but I completely forgot that one of my opponents for them in this fight had the spell on them. So that character got knocked unconscious because I forgot I could attempt to dispel the magic that was thrown at her. What can you do? Sometimes and that's something that will happen from time to time. You have so much going on, kind of trying a story, what the other people are doing, that you forget to read certain part on your character sheet, and whoops. Well, it's always nice to be wise afterwards, right? Yeah. No, but so, and that's what I see like is sometimes I feel it's nice that like Savage World has more of a like realistic situation in combat, because yeah, like you are not Flash or something. You can't really dodge a bullet or an arrow. Now, I know some of you might, it's like, yes, you can learn how to parry an arrow at least with your sword or stuff like that. And sure, there are some TV shows that has been able to catch an arrow, but that is extremely hard to learn. And I don't know how much accuracy in real life. I'm not an expert at archery or defend against archery. I have no expertise in that in real life. So I will not state that as a fact or something like that. But it makes sense, like most people can't really dodge an arrow if they're not really lucky. And forget to dodge a bullet, that's way too fast for a regular human. No matter how strong you are. And slinging spells, yeah, like I guess that could be like an iffy thing, because if you depending on how to cast your spells, maybe a bit sweaty. So like if they have to say words before and do some gestures with their hands before casting it, you have some time to react to it. But in Savage World, you don't really have actions like in D&D, which you can even after every turn you have like a reaction to something. If something happens, you can react to that. You don't have that in Savage World. You have your turn, which is movement, action. And then if you want, we have something called multi-action. But if with every multi-action you do, you get a penalty. And maximum is a -4, unless it's a special occasion, because it's -4 and +4 has been utilized to the most usual bid things that you can go to max on each side to streamline Savage World, because Savage World is supposed to be fast, furious, and fun. and not dragging out too much. So that's what, like, okay, yay. So every multi I can start with a -2, then a -4, which could be devastating to some people, because -4 to try to hit somebody, that's hard, because depending on how high parry you have or your opponent have, that -4 can be literally the things that stop you from connecting or truly connect with a person. And guns, that's like -4. That is, it's not as, I would say, not as big as trying to combat a parry when you meta combat, but it's still something to consider when you want to decide to have take a multi action, because a minus to any roll is never really a fun stuff. But if you feel like there's something you should try, or if you embed yourself in character and you feel like he's gonna do this because he's been tired of this fight, he's angry at the person, he's gonna try. Or more like, I have some edges that will lower the penalties a bit, so I can go for it, which is nice. But in a sense, within like D&D, you're stuck with the initiative order that you have been given. You don't get the new initiative every round, which kind of helps a bit. But I like the funness of it, having every round being new starting point. But also, like, yeah, you have a chance to get a Joker, to get a Benny, as players or as a GM. So yeah, they are now getting the taste of combat. They had a lot of fun. One of the players had a lot of something that we are calling explosion die. That means if you roll the highest number on your die, that means you can re-roll it and add that number to the first number. So if you have a d6 and roll a 6, okay, you re-rolled, get a 4, okay, now you roll a 10. And that can mean that you can hit with a race. And if you hit with a race, you get an extra damage die. But you only get one, no matter how many races or explosion you get on your die. So really, when you want the multi-explosion that she got, is in the damage dice. Because you get a person get a wound every time the damage hits 4 above your current toughness. So for instance, if your opponent has a toughness of 10 and you roll a 14, it gets 1 wound. If you roll 18, that's 2 wounds, and so forth and so forth. So you can, and one of my home players, he rolled one time in damage, I think was 76 points of damage. Now, that's a lot of damage. And now, here's the thing. I can pay a Benny to soak the damage. But I also need to hit so many. For instance, like, if he had rolled to 80 and I still have a toughness of 10, that is 20 wounds. Which means I need to roll almost as much, or at least close to 80 as I can, because you soak a wound for every 4 you get above. So 4 heals 1, 8 heals 2, 12 heals 3 wounds. In the same sense as how much wound you get is like 4, and for every 4 above you get more and more. And that's hard to do. Now you can keep spending a bennies, but you spend a benny to reroll that specific number. And if you don't have many bennies, that means you maybe waste bennies only use this wound if you have multiple enemies facing the hero's party, or you really only have this main villain, then it's a case like here, but you always start with a newer number. But if you have giving a guy 20 wounds, he is completely dead. No matter what. Because that's extremely hard to actually heal from. Which made me like miss the part like from D&D that has HP, because I kind of like that more than having wounds taken away. But I think, like I said, Savage World was made to be fast, fun, and furious. So the streamlined combat as well. And of course, you have different ways to maybe giving more wounds. You have for monsters have the resilience and very resilience, which gives them 1 extra wound. Very gives them 2 extra wounds they can take. And then you have a size scale, and if you're large enough, you get extra wounds. That also means you're easier to hit. Because when you go from normal to big, there's a +1 to hit you, and you have a -1 to hit the person that's 1 size below you. And so far and so. So yeah, you can get big to have multiple wounds. But you're gonna have a harder time to hit your opponents, and the opponent's gonna have a easier time to hit you because you're just large. So, in a sense, I would say Savage World's combat system is very much simplified, but also like different in a way of having more realistic way of thinking of different way of attacking people than D&D. But then again, D&D is high fantasy, and I don't mind that they'll have AC for everything you can throw at a person, because in the way D&D works, it's a high fantasy game. So yeah, of course, if you're a hero, you can train yourself to dodge an arrow coming your way. Or as in sometimes you do when like a person misses, you say like you manage to enough turn your shoulders, you just glance off the armor, maybe get a scratch on the armor, but nothing that will permanently weaken the armor, for instance. So I would say that's the most difference, and both have a merit for me in the way of role-playing games are supposed to be handled, because you're playing a fantasy game, so having something that is more realistic could be fun for some, but not for everybody. And having something that's more hero acting, like yeah, I'm a hero. I can dodge an arrow. I can duck away from the spell. It's also very valid. But it's always up to the players and anyone interested in tabletop RPG to find a system that they like and say that it works for them. I like both systems of D&D and Savage Worlds. So, and the combat is so much fun, and you can always feel a difference, especially when you have played both systems for a while. You feel a difference, and you can always have an opinion on it, which I have a lot of. But most of all, it's very fun to having more way of having a fantasy game with more realistic behaviors in combat. But here's a question for you guys. What would you like in a fantasy game? Would you like the one in D&D where you have one armor class for everything you can throw at your opponent? Or do you like the more realistic version of combat as in Savage Worlds? Comment down below what you think. And if you have another system that has a way different combat system than Savage War or D&D, please hit me up with it, so that because I would love to try another system to see how I feel about that one. And as always, guys, if you like this video and want to see more of me, please hit that like and subscribe button, and don't forget to hit that notification bell so you know when I will sweat in a new video and show you guys more fun times. Until then, guys, have a great weekend and see you all guys in the next video. Bye.